Nice. Yeah, that works. That's a really good revision technique. And again, for all of these, you're going to have to figure out what's good for you and what's kind of the best revision. Yeah, should do. So, as I said, on my mind map, I've tried to narrow down onto the most important bits of research. And that's quite an important thing to do. You need to remember when you're revising, what you're doing is you're taking masses of information. You know, in the textbook, think of how much text there is there on each topic, and then times that by 6. And, you know, you're not going to remember every word of every page, are you? So what you need to do is focus in and figure out, right, what are the important bits? And obviously the idea here is that you're remembering bits that you can then expand upon in the exam. And that's why acronyms and acrostics and things like that work. Millie, phone away, please. That's why acronyms and acrostics work, because it helps you expand. And that's why mind maps work as well. Remember, using your memory knowledge that you've got from last year, so you're using your visual spatial sketch pad, you're trying to recreate this again and then go on to the key bits of information. So this is one way to do it. And another way, I'm going to go through a table on the board, again, highlighting the most important research. So this is for the eating topic. I'm going to split it down into the 6 different parts of the topic. So the first was attitudes to food. Then we looked at dieting. Success and failure of dieting. Then it was neural. We didn't look at it in that order, but that's how it is in the spec. Then it was evolutionary. Then it was psychological explanations of anorexia. And then it was biological explanations of anorexia. Pen's running out. Okay, so as I said, I've tried to focus in on the AO1. Usually that is a bit of research, but sometimes it's not. So the attitudes to food, what did I focus in on here? So social learning, and that was Brown and Ogden. Can anyone remember what they found? Yeah. Good. So they found that the attitudes to food that parents had tended to be the attitudes that children had. So that suggests children model their parents' behaviour and they will copy that sort of behaviour. Good. Did I have anything else? I had Garg et al. As well in there. Anyone remember what Garg et al. Looked at? Not quite. Garg et al. Yeah, good. So that was mood. Mood, yeah, popcorn and grapes. No, that's fine. Again, yeah, you need to be obviously tailoring your revision to yourself. So if you decided that you're not going to focus on mood when you look at attitudes to food, that's fine, but you need to make sure you've got something for social learning theory and culture and ethnicity. So that's fine. But I focus on that one. Good. Dieting. And then I focus on Herman and Mack.
That was the ice cream one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So that was the preload one.
Where's the dieting? Oh, yeah.
Good. Preload and ice cream. I also mentioned the Wegener study. What was that one?
White bear.
Yeah.
Where he asked people to think of a white bear, and then he asked people to not think of a white bear, and the people that he asked not to talk about a white bear more.
So it was denial, white bear study.
How do you say that name? Wegener.
Wegener. And then if you wanted to look at all three, I also mentioned Redden. What was Redden? Jelly bean study. Yeah, and they found that if you had more detail about the jelly beans, they enjoyed them more. And so that shows success of dieting. Good. Neural mechanisms of eating. So these ones, for your AO1, I need to redraw that line. Oh, all my black pens are dying. That's better. Neural mechanisms of eating for AO1. There's not much research, but what we did look at was the lateral and ventromedial hypothalamus. So that's what you talk about here. Lateral hypothalamus. What was that? The off or on switch?
On.
Yeah. And so the ventral medial.
The on switch for eating.
Yeah. Is the off switch. I did have one bit of research that I mentioned in here, and that was rolls and rolls. Anyone remember that study?
Was that with mice? And one was fed like the neurotransmitter and then they got that.
That was Zhang with leptin, so I haven't actually included that one. You can include that in your AO2. Rolls and rolls was the role of the amygdala.
Oh yeah, what would they eat, like foods they will eat and then like move on to the same rate?
Yeah. Yep, use of the amygdala.
What was the myocardium?
Sorry,
Rolls and rolls for myocardium.
amygdala. Then I went on to evolutionary, food preference. Again, maybe not as much research as the other ones, but we speak about the different tastes, don't we?
What are they doing in rolls and rolls?
We'll go back over that in your book. Yeah. So, again, part of the revision is to highlight the areas that you don't know as well, so if you're not sure of that one.
Seems like quite a long place.
Really?
Yeah.
No, you got the rest of those.
I don't know all this lateral hypothalamus stuff.
Okay, well, maybe it's the neural one that you need to go back over. But that's the point of revision, isn't it? It's not saying, okay, I know everything. It's highlighting what you don't know and highlighting the stuff you do need to go back over. So the taste, that was the sweet, sour, umami. What were the other ones? Bitter. There was a salt, yeah, that was the fifth one, salt, good. So taste. The research I did have here was Milton. Anyone remember that one? What did Milton say? So it wasn't actually necessarily a study, but he had a theory.
That we're designed to eat meat because we want the high calories or fat content.
Yeah.
So it gets onto our next meal.
Is that Mitten or
Milton, I think. Oh no, maybe it was Mitten.
Yeah.
It was Mitten, wasn't it? Not Milton. Yeah, sorry.
Who was it that said we needed meat to be as developed as well?
That was Mitten, yeah. So Mitten said that we had to have eaten meat to be able to develop intellectually, to be able to survive kind of from meal to meal. So that the idea that we've got this taste preference, that was Mitten. Again, there was research into taste aversion, wasn't there? But I don't want to bog you down in research, so you can mention that. But
What's the difference between food preference and taste? Because surely taste are the same thing.
so food preference is what we're evolutionarily programmed to want.
Oh.
So that's meats, that's high-calorie foods. Taste is that stuff with salt, sweet, umami, sour and bitter. And remember when we looked at the mark scheme actually mentioned the taste stuff. So if you do have that question, it is good to mention taste. Psychological explanations of anorexia. The big one you need to mention here is brunch. I would start with that one if I were you. Again, probably only based on the mark scheme. The mark scheme always seems to mention brunch when it talks about psychological explanations of anorexia nervosa. That's a psychodynamic approach. Anyone remember what that said? What did Bruch say?
Well, wasn't it with early childhood that kind of control? So, like, you've got to control what you put into your body, so on.
Good, yeah. So it's to do with effective parents, and ineffective parents end up with children with anorexia. And again, yeah, it's to do with control as well. As well as that, I mentioned media. So it's another one. That was Gregory.
Surely that can flip the other way around with Bruch's research and be like, you can control what you eat if you eat a lot of food. So you can eat.
Yeah, potentially. It's not how it's been interpreted, but potentially. Gregory, can anyone remember that one?
Was that with Phoebe?
I think it might have been. Off the top of my head,
In
I'm
1995 they got TV and then suddenly culture being fat, or being overweight, changed to being slim.
yeah, that seems to make sense. You got that, Millie?
Huh?
What was the Gregory study? Under,
Oh, I haven't got that far in my vision.
you've got your textbook in front of you.
What's the one?
The Gregory study in media for psychological explanation of anorexia nervosa. Okay. Right. No, it was media. This is the 16% of 15 to 18-year-olds are currently on a diet. That's media. 16%. Oh, was it 16%?
Oh yeah, is it the one that's... I thought it was 70% of
No.
15 to 18-year-olds was on a diet.
Yep. Good. And then biological explanations of anorexia. I've got serotonin to begin with. That was Baylor et al.
What was it?
Baylor et al. Compared serotonin activity in women recovering from restricting type of anorexia and found higher levels. So it shows that serotonin has a role to play in anorexia. And then finally, it was the two evolutionary theories. So that was the adaptation to flee famine hypothesis, saying that if you're anorexic, you're more likely to be able to reserve or not eat for longer periods, so you could flee and find areas where you could get more resources. And then the other is the reproductive suppression hypothesis. That was by Serby.
What was it if you didn't have much food in your area completely?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Why not?
Anorexic, so I didn't have actually much energy.
Yeah, but what they said is that anorexia is an extreme version of this. And that, if think in evolutionary times, there was one person who, when they had no food, that was it, they couldn't move. they did nothing, they weren't able to survive. And then there was another person who could go long periods without food. So that was the anorexic person. And then, obviously, when food was more readily available, or they could move to find areas that there was food, they would then survive and reproduce, whereas this person would have died off. So it kind of makes sense, but I see what you mean. It does have
I recommend
weaknesses.
discussing those